They say time heals all wounds, but that's not true, not for every wound. Some don't heal. Some stay buried, raw and aching, behind a practiced smile and a grandmother's warm hug. My name is Cynthia Jackson. I'm 76 years old, and I live in Hanover, New Hampshire. I bake pies for the church on Sundays. I read mystery novels in the quiet hours of the afternoon. To most folks, I'm just Grandma Cynthia, gentle, gray-haired, the kind of woman who always remembers your birthday. But there's a story I've kept locked away for nearly 6 decades. A story about a different Cynthia, one who bled, who screamed into her pillow at night, who learned far too early that monsters don't always wear masks. Sometimes they wear perfume. Sometimes they share your last name. I was born in the spring of 1948, the only daughter of Walter and Marjorie Jackson. My childhood was modest but full of love. We lived in a small cedar-shingled house off the edge of Hanover's Main Street, surrounded by sugar maples and quiet neighbors. My mother, Marjorie, was the type of woman who made everything feel safe. She had a soft voice, strong hands, and a heart big enough to hold the whole town. My father, Walter, was quieter. A factory man worked at the Hanover Bottling Company down by the river. He left before sunrise, came home after dark, always with his boots muddy and the smell of metal on his clothes. He wasn't affectionate, but he provided, and back then, that was enough. By the time I turned 19 in 1967, I was still living at home. College wasn't in the cards for me, but I dreamed of someday opening a bakery like the one in town. My days were filled with helping Mama in the kitchen, volunteering at St. John's Parish, and writing in my little notebook by the window. Life was slow, predictable, safe. That illusion shattered on a Saturday in January. I remember the weather oddly warm for a New Hampshire winter, the kind of damp warmth that made the snow slush underfoot and the air feel heavy. I woke that morning to silence. Usually, Mama would already be humming in the kitchen, frying up cornbread or brewing her favorite chicory coffee. But that day, nothing. No sound, no clatter. Just the distant ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I called out, "Mama." No answer. The house felt wrong. I stepped into the kitchen. Cold stove, empty counter. Her apron still hung neatly on the hook. Something inside me twisted. I patted down the hallway to my parents' bedroom. The door was closed. Mama never kept it closed, not even in winter. I knocked once. "Mama." My voice barely a whisper. No reply. I opened the door slowly. The curtains were drawn, the room dim, and there she was lying on her side, facing the wall. Still, too still. I called out again. She didn't move. I stepped closer, put my hand on her shoulder. Cold. I turned her over, and the scream that tore from my throat wasn't human. It came from some primal place I didn't know existed. Her eyes were wide open, staring into nothing, her mouth slightly agape, as if frozen mid-sentence. Her skin had a bluish tint. The breath left my lungs. I dropped to my knees, shaking her, calling her name. She was gone. Just like that. Neighbors came running. Mrs. Eleanor Baker from next door rushed in with sugar water and prayer beads. The Wilson boys from down the street fetched the doctor, old Dr. Simmons, who delivered half the town. He checked her pulse, looked at me solemnly, and said the words I'll never forget. Likely a heart attack, sometime in the night. She didn't feel a thing. Lies. All of it felt like lies. Mama was 42 years old. She'd never had heart issues. She was healthy just the day before she was dancing barefoot in the kitchen, planning to cook her famous chicken stew for Sunday supper. She couldn't have just died. Not like that, but everyone accepted it, everyone but me. And when I went to my father's dresser later that night, looking for an old photo to place by Mama's coffin, I found something that made my blood turn to ice. A letter, folded twice, slipped beneath his undershirts. The ink was still fresh. Soon we'll be together forever. My love, it read, I dream of your hands, your voice, your breath on my skin. Soon, darling, soon. It was signed Vivian, and it smelled like roses and foreign smoke, like sin dressed in silk. 3 days before my mother's death, that's when I knew something had been stolen from us, that Mama hadn't died from God's will, but from a betrayal so sharp it could kill. That was the day I stopped being a girl and started walking the long, bloodied road to truth. The day of the funeral felt like a fever dream. Hanover, usually blanketed in snow this time of year, was drenched in slush and gray mist. The kind of day where time feels like it doesn't move, where even the birds stay quiet. Marjorie Jackson was laid to rest before the sun touched the tops of the pine trees behind St. John's. The casket was plain, unfinished pine, with a white cloth draped over it. A few withered flowers sat on top, curling at the edges from the damp. The house was full. Neighbors brought casseroles and condolences. Mrs. Baker sat with me the entire morning, holding my hand like it might disappear if she let go. People murmured the same things over and over. She was so young, so full of life. She always brought peach pies to the church sale. I nodded politely. I said thank you when I needed to, but inside, I was numb, except for the part of me that burned with suspicion, because I knew something wasn't right. My father, Walter, wore the perfect mask. He stood at the front door, shaking hands, dabbing his eyes with a pressed handkerchief. He hugged people he barely knew, accepted their sorrow with a tight jaw and a soft pat on the back. But I was watching him closely, and I saw it, that flicker, the glint in his eye that only came alive when she walked in. It was early afternoon when I first laid eyes on Vivian Monroe. She wasn't from around here. That was clear the second she stepped into our living room. She wore a long black wool coat, not the cheap kind from Miller's Dry Goods downtown, but something tailored, sleek, expensive. Her hair was silver blonde and set in a perfect bob just above her shoulders. Her heels clicked against the hardwood like they didn't belong in a house with muddy boots at the door. Everyone turned to look, even the pastor. She smelled like lilacs and cigarettes. The scent lingered after she passed, the way pipe smoke does in an old room. She didn't cry. She didn't even look sad. She walked straight to the casket, stared at my mother's face for a long moment, then whispered something I couldn't hear. When she turned, she didn't cross herself. She didn't pray. She didn't even pretend. She just walked straight to my father, and he lit up like a boy at a carnival. His shoulders straightened, his eyes sharpened. He looked like a man seeing a promise fulfilled. She extended her gloved hand. "Walter," she said softly, "I'm so sorry for your loss." He took her hand in both of his and held it too long. They looked at each other like they were the only ones in the room. I felt the bile rise in my throat. I forced myself to speak. "Who is that?" I whispered to Mrs. Baker. She squinted over her glasses. "I've never seen her before." "Child, not from our end of town, that's for sure." Later that evening, as the last of the neighbors filtered out and the casseroles cooled untouched, I walked into the kitchen and found her sitting at the table, Vivian Monroe, drinking from my mother's wedding china. The good set Mama only brought out for holidays. She smiled at me, slow and deliberate. "Cynthia, is it?" she asked. I didn't answer. My father came in behind me and sighed like he had something rehearsed. "Cynthia, honey," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "We need to talk." I stiffened. "Why is she here?" Vivian spoke before he could. "After everything, it just didn't feel right leaving him alone. He needs someone." "Someone," I snapped. "My mother hasn't even been gone a full day." "Cynthia," my father said sternly, "don't raise your voice." I ignored him. "Who are you? Where did you come from?" "I'm someone who cared about your father," she said calmly, "and about your mother, in my own way. My mother never even mentioned you. She wouldn't have. Our friendship was private. That was when I exploded. You were sleeping with him, weren't you? While my mother was folding his socks and baking his meals, you were writing him love letters and spraying them with perfume." "Cynthia," my father's voice cracked across the room. "That's enough." "No," I said. "It's not." He raised his hand. For a second, I thought he was going to put it down, that he would pull back, but he didn't. His palm landed hard across my face. I stumbled, the sting spreading like fire across my cheek. The sound echoed louder than anything in the room. Vivian didn't flinch. She just sipped her tea. And then, in the calmest voice I'd ever heard, she said, "You can call me Vivian. After all, we're going to be family soon." I turned to my father, eyes wide. "What does she mean?" He looked away, ashamed. "We're getting married," he said. "Next month." The world tilted. I backed away, my knees threatening to give. I couldn't feel my legs. I couldn't breathe. "But Mama's she's not even cold." "Don't talk like that," he said. Vivian stood. "It's going to be all right. Cynthia, change is hard, but you'll see, we'll be just fine." She reached out to touch my shoulder. I jerked away. And that night, as the moonlight fell across my mother's empty side of the bed, I made a promise. I would find out what really happened, no matter what it cost me. The days that followed were a blur of shame and silence. I didn't speak to my father. I didn't look at him. He didn't apologize. And Vivian, she acted as though nothing had happened, like she'd always belonged in that house. She moved around our home with the arrogance of a queen, laying claim to conquered land, replacing curtains, tossing old pots, clearing my mother's sewing kit off the hallway table. 3 days after Mama's burial, I came home from the library and found 2 strange men hauling out our living room sofa. The one Mama had hand-stitched the cushions for when I was 12. "Wait, what are you doing? That's not yours." One of the men looked at me and shrugged. "Ma'am said to take it." "Ma'am? Who's ma'am?" That's when I heard the sharp click of high heels. Vivian appeared in the doorway, wearing a deep red dress and a thin black belt that looked expensive. Her lipstick matched the dress. Her expression was one of cool amusement. "Cynthia, darling, you're home early. You're throwing out my mother's things. This house needs a fresh start." Walter agrees. "The old furniture doesn't match the new beginning." "That sofa was her favorite," I said, voice shaking. "She embroidered every stitch on those cushions by hand." Vivian gave a small sigh. "And now it's time for something new. It's just furniture. Cynthia, let it go. Let it go." My mother was barely in the ground, and this woman was wiping away every trace of her like she'd never existed. I could still smell Mama's rose lotion in the cushions. Still see the indent her body made when she sat reading her Bible each night. I ran upstairs before I did something I couldn't undo. That evening, at dinner, my father made an announcement with all the cheer of a man who'd won a prize. We'll be having a small ceremony next week. Nothing big, just the pastor and a few folks from the lodge. I looked down at my plate, dry meatloaf and overcooked beans. Mama would never have served this. You expect me to be there? I asked. Walter took a slow sip of his iced tea and set the glass down without looking at me. You live in this house. You'll act like family. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Later that night, I went into my parents' his bedroom, the room that had once held warmth and lullabies, now cold and foreign. I stood in front of my mother's dresser, which Vivian had already begun emptying. I pulled open the top drawer, hoping for anything that still smelled of Mama. Instead, I found a bottle of French perfume, the same scent from the funeral. I smashed it against the wall. The glass shattered. The scent bloomed like a sickness in the air. Vivian barged in seconds later. What have you done? That was Mama's dresser. You don't get to touch it. This is my room now. This isn't your house. I screamed. Her hand flew up before I could move. The slap was quick, sharp, not nearly as hard as my father's had been, but it left me breathless all the same. I stumbled back, grabbing the edge of the dresser to steady myself. You little brat, she hissed. Your father told me to be patient with you, but clearly that was a mistake. I was shaking, from pain, from rage, from something that had been building since the day she walked into our lives. Don't you dare touch me again. Oh, sweetheart, she said with a smile, stepping closer. You don't make the rules here. I do. And if you don't learn that fast, life's going to get a whole lot harder. I wanted to run, to grab Mama's picture and leave. But where would I go? I was 19. I had no job. No money, no college degree, and she knew it. Vivian didn't just marry my father. She conquered him, controlled him, and now she was claiming me. The next morning, I came downstairs to find the locks on the kitchen cabinets changed. You'll have to ask permission if you want anything, she said cheerfully over her coffee. We're on a budget now. That was the beginning of it. The rules. No locking my bedroom door. No visitors. No calls after 6 p.m. No leaving the house without telling her. No leaving the porch without her permission. My father said nothing, just nodded when she spoke, like she was speaking for them both. It got worse. She burned my toast on purpose, left bleach stains on my favorite dress, hid my shoes when I was late for Sunday service, and always with that same syrupy tone. Oh dear, silly me. I tried to talk to Walter, tried to remind him of Mama's words, her warmth, her spirit. He stared at me over his newspaper and said, Vivian's doing her best. You should appreciate her. Appreciate her. That night, I cried into my pillow, my mother's pillow, still faintly smelling of rose water. I clung to it like a child, like it could somehow bring her back. I thought of running away, but I had nowhere to go, nowhere that would believe me. Hanover was a town of quiet streets and quiet people. Folks kept their heads down and their mouths shut. And in the late 60s, domestic abuse wasn't a word anyone dared to whisper. I was alone, and I was beginning to realize that surviving in that house would require more than hope. It would require silence and strength and a plan. Spring came late to Hanover that year. Snow clung to the sidewalks like it didn't want to let go, and the trees stayed bare long past Easter. Inside our house, it might as well have still been January, cold, stiff, lifeless, Vivian Monroe had settled in completely by then. My mother's doilies were gone, replaced by sleek, factory-made placemats. The books on the living room shelf had vanished. Mama's favorite gardening guides and cookbooks tossed into boxes I never saw again. Her rocking chair donated to the church thrift store without a word. And every time I protested, every time I even breathed a reminder of the life that had come before, Vivian had a way of making me feel crazy for it. You're being sentimental again. Cynthia, she'd say with a sigh, it's just clutter. But it wasn't clutter. It was my mother. Vivian erased her, piece by piece, smile by smile. I quickly learned the rules of survival in that house. Don't ask questions. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't lock doors. Don't look too long at my father when he was tired or when the bottle of bourbon he now kept tucked behind the pantry had gone dry. Vivian was careful, though clever. She didn't leave bruises, not yet, not the kind you could point to. Instead, she chipped away at my soul, one humiliating, gaslighting moment at a time. She'd leave burnt food only on my plate, charred toast, overcooked meat, soupy rice. She'd laugh and say, "Oh, you're such a picky eater," when I pushed it away. Then turn to my father and coo, "Walter, your daughter barely eats. Do you think she's trying to stay thin for someone?" That was the beginning of her favorite tactic, sowing suspicion. She was always planting seeds of doubt, twisting facts just enough to seem reasonable. One Sunday morning, I came downstairs in a simple navy blouse and skirt, the same kind of thing I'd worn to church for years. Vivian stared at me as I passed the breakfast table. "Well, don't you look eager," she said. "What does that mean?" I asked, already bracing myself. "Skirt's a little short. Don't you think?" Hoping to catch the pastor's eye, I froze. My father looked up from his paper. Just a glance. But it was enough. "I think she looks fine," I muttered. Vivian chuckled. "Of course you do." That day at church, I felt everyone's eyes on me, though no one was looking. I kept tugging at my skirt the entire service, and that was her gift. Vivian could make you feel ashamed of things you never questioned before. In April, the physical games began. Nothing obvious, just accidental bumps in the hallway, hot dishwater splashing too close to my hands, stepping on my foot with her narrow stilettos. "Oops. So sorry, dear. I'm just so clumsy, always loud enough for Walter to hear. Always soft enough that he could pretend it was nothing." I tried to tell him once. We were in the garage. He was oiling the lawnmower like he used to every spring. I stood near the door, hands trembling. "Dad," I started. He didn't look up. "Vivian's been hurting me." That got his attention. "How do you mean she pushes me?" "Stepped on my foot yesterday. Burned my hand with tea. On purpose." He stared at me, hard, then shook his head. "She wouldn't do that. She does." "I swear, Cynthia." His voice was sharp. "Stop making things up. She's trying to bring order to this house. You've been difficult since your mother died. She's trying to erase her. She's trying to move forward. We all are." I felt something collapse inside me. "She's not your mother," he added flatly. "But she is your family now. Try acting like it." That night, I cried quietly into my pillow, not because of what he'd said, but because I wasn't surprised. By May, Vivian had locked down the house like a warden. She installed new locks on the pantry and the freezer, telling me it was for budget control. She stopped giving me lunch money, saying there was food at home. But if I made a sandwich, she'd scold me for wasting bread. If I boiled eggs, she'd claim I hadn't asked permission. I lost weight without trying. Then she started on my friendships. Angela called today. She said one afternoon, peeling apples at the sink, I told her you were unavailable. Too much going on at home. Why would you say that? She sounded disappointed, said she might stop by anyway. I told her it wasn't a good idea. You need to focus on learning to run a home, be a proper woman. Your mother didn't raise you with discipline, and it shows. Angela stopped calling. So did every other friend. Vivian was good at one thing, isolation, like a spider wrapping me in silk, slowly, surely. She told my father I was lazy, that I didn't help with chores, that I talked back, that I rolled my eyes at her in public. He believed it all. Sometimes I wondered if it made his life easier to believe her, if he was too ashamed, too weak, too tired to admit what was happening, or if he just didn't care anymore. In June, the insults turned into public humiliations. When guests came over, usually Vivian's polished, perfumed friends from the Women's Society, she made a point of pointing out my flaws. Cynthia's not very quick. Bless her heart, she'd say with a smile. Didn't quite inherit her mother's brains. Or her charm. Come to think of it, if I tried to object, she'd turn to her guests with mock concern. You see how aggressive she is, so defensive. We're trying to help her, but it's not easy. I stopped talking. I stopped smiling. I stopped looking people in the eye. The shame grew roots in my chest. Every word she spoke became a truth I couldn't argue against, and with each passing day, I could feel myself disappearing, just like Mama's embroidered cushions and dog-eared cookbooks. Vivian hadn't just come to take my father. She came to take everything. By July, the house no longer felt like my home. It felt like a trap. Vivian had found a way to turn every room into a weapon. The kitchen became a place of punishment. She'd assign chores and then criticize every effort. The living room was her throne room, where she held court with her friends and mocked me in coded insults. Even my bedroom had become a prison, stripped of warmth and safety. My father, he wasn't the same man anymore. Walter Jackson used to be solid, predictable, quiet, but dependable. The kind of man who fixed a leaky faucet and left a note with $5 in gas money on the counter. He hadn't been warm, but he'd never been cruel. Now he drank. Every day after work, he came home with a new bottle tucked under his arm, bourbon, gin, whatever was cheapest. He would slump into the recliner in the den and drink until his eyes glazed over. Vivian would hover over him like some doting wife from a television ad, refilling his glass and calling him dear in that fake, lilting tone. And when he drank too much, the anger came. At first, it was verbal, sharp words, accusations that made no sense. Why isn't dinner on the table? I've been working all day. What do you do around here? You act like a princess in a house you don't pay for. I tried to answer, tried to keep my voice calm, respectful, but it never mattered. The liquor made sure of that. And Vivian, she always stood nearby, fanning the flames. She needs discipline. Walter, she'd whisper, she needs structure. Marjorie coddled her too much. One night, he came home slurring, the stink of whiskey clinging to him like smoke. I had set the table, meatloaf, canned peas, mashed potatoes. I hadn't cooked much, but I'd tried. He took one bite, then threw his fork on the plate. Tastes like rubber. I followed Mama's recipe, I said quietly. He pushed the plate away and stood. That's the problem. You're stuck in the past. Then he reached across the table and slapped the plate into my lap. Hot peas and potatoes spilled down my skirt. Vivian gasped, but not from shock. She was thrilled. I could see it in her eyes. "Walter," she said softly, "don't dirty your hands. She's just being dramatic." I stood up, my cheeks red, my clothes stained. "This isn't right," I whispered. He turned on me. "Don't tell me what's right in my house." I backed away. He didn't follow, but the message was clear. I had no rights here, only roles, and mine was shrinking by the day. August brought the beatings, subtle at first. A shove into the door frame when I didn't move fast enough. A sudden grip on my arm that left bruises. Vivian never touched me when Walter was home, but she didn't need to. She had trained him by then. The worst part wasn't even the pain. It was the way they made me question my own memory. I'd say, "He pushed me." Vivian would say, "You tripped." I'd show her a bruise. She'd say, "You bruise easily. Drink more milk." I began to doubt my own reality, my own body. It was like I was dissolving day by day into someone I didn't recognize. Someone quieter, smaller, powerless. September was when the real isolation began. Vivian nailed my window shut. She said it was for safety, but I knew the truth. She didn't want me seeing the world, didn't want me breathing it. She began locking my bedroom door from the outside. "I'm worried about you," she said one morning. "You seem unstable. You might hurt yourself." "I'm not unstable." "Then why do you cry so much? Why do you hide because you've made my life hell?" She smiled like I'd paid her a compliment. "That's not a very nice thing to say to your stepmother. You're not my mother." Her eyes narrowed. "No, but I'm the one who's alive." That night, I dreamed of my mother's voice, soft and distant like wind through tall pines. When I woke, the door was still locked, and the sun never reached through that glass. Not anymore. In October, Vivian started withholding food. "You're getting too heavy," she said, pushing a single piece of dry toast across the table. "I'm not hungry," I replied, even though my stomach had been growling since dawn. "Well, that works out then," she laughed, sipping her coffee. By then, I had lost nearly 20 pounds. My clothes hung loose. My cheeks were sunken, but she still called me fat at every opportunity. "Just like your mother," she'd whisper, loud enough for Walter to hear. And he didn't care. Or maybe he did, but not enough. One night, I caught him staring at me, not with concern, with disgust. "You look like a ghost," he muttered. "I'm starving," I said. He took another sip from his glass. "Then eat. She won't let me." He said nothing, not a word. In November, the locks turned to chains. I woke one morning to find a bolt installed on the outside of my door, a literal chain. Vivian caught me staring at it and shrugged. "You should be grateful we're even letting you stay here." "Stay here. This is my house." "It was your mother's house," she said, her voice like vinegar. "But she's gone now, and you're a guest." I wanted to scream, to throw something, to break every plate she'd bought. But I didn't, because I knew somewhere deep in my gut that if I gave her a reason, she'd make sure I disappeared too. That winter, I kept a secret under my pillow, a photograph of my mother, bent at the corners, smudged from my tears, but still whole. Every night, I'd hold it to my chest and whisper, "I'm still here. Mama, I'm still fighting." And I was. But for how long? I didn't know. December arrived like a bitter guest. Hanover shimmered under fresh snow, store windows glowing with wreaths and red ribbons, people bundled up in scarves and mittens, filled with cheer and Christmas carols. But inside our house, the air was sharp, cold, suffocating despite the fireplace roaring. The house had been decorated, but not with Mama's garlands or her handmade angel for the tree. No, Vivian preferred elegance. Thin gold tinsel, glass bulbs from some catalog, white lights instead of warm yellow. It looked like a hotel lobby, sterile, pretty, empty. She didn't ask if I wanted to help decorate. She never asked anything. Christmas Eve came, and for the first time, she invited guests, 3 women, all neatly dressed in wool skirts and leather gloves, with tight smiles and sharp eyes. They spoke with that particular tone women from upper crust circles use, like they were all characters from a New England novel where nothing truly bad ever happened. I was in the kitchen, peeling potatoes, trying to keep to myself. That's when I heard them whispering in the living room. Poor Vivian, one of them said, taking on a husband and a troubled stepdaughter. That girl looks hollow. She's ungrateful, Vivian replied, loud enough for me to hear. Doesn't appreciate everything I do. Her mother babied her far too long. Another woman gasped lightly. I heard the girl's unstable, screams at night, scares the neighbors. Vivian made a sound of fake concern, trauma, they say. But between you and me, I think there's more to it. I dropped the potato. Something snapped in me. I stormed into the living room, my apron stained, my fists clenched. You're lying. All heads turned. You're lying about me, about my mother. She was a good woman. My father never laid a hand on her, no matter what lies you feed these people. Vivian stood, gracefully, like an actress in a play. Cynthia, sweetheart, what are you doing? You're scaring our guests. I'm not the one who should scare them. You are. She didn't flinch. Instead, she calmly reached into her handbag sitting on the side table and pulled out a photograph. She held it up. This, she said, turning to her guests, is what I've had to live with. The women leaned in. I stepped closer. It was a picture of my mother, a black eye, swollen cheek, lips cracked, her face bruised in a way I had never seen. I froze. What is that? Vivian turned it toward me. Your mother. After one of Walter's rages, I helped her, nursed her back. That's how we became close. No, I whispered. That's not true. She slipped. I remember that day she fell in the bathroom. Oh, sweetheart, one woman murmured. They all say that. I stared at the photo. My mother's face so familiar, so broken. My heart throbbed with confusion. Could it be true? No. No. I had to believe it wasn't. You're a viper, I hissed. That's when she reached for the broom, one of those old ones, wooden, with a thick handle. It had been leaning against the wall, for sweeping, not for what came next. The first blow landed on my shoulder. Don't speak to me that way in front of guests. The second caught my ribs. I gasped. Ungrateful little brat, I turned to run, but she was faster. Years of pent-up hatred behind every swing. The women screamed but didn't move. They stood frozen, horrified, fascinated. Vivian's blows rained down on my arms, back, legs. One strike cracked across the side of my head. My vision blurred. I collapsed to the floor. I feed you, I clothe you, she shouted. And this is how you thank me, Vivian. Stop, one of the women finally cried. You're hurting her. She needs to learn. Blood dripped down my cheek. My sweater tore at the shoulder. The wood cracked from the force of her rage. Then she stopped, threw the broom down like a finished job. Get up, she said breathlessly. Clean yourself up before Walter gets home. I couldn't move. She left the room, and I crawled, dragged myself to the stairs and up to my bedroom, locked the door, curled into a ball, trembling. the pillow soaked with blood and tears. When my father came home hours later, he knocked once. "Cynthia, I'm not feeling well." I croaked. "Vivian said you made a scene. You embarrassed her in front of guests. She beat me," I whispered. Silence. "She said you tried to attack her, that she had to defend herself. It's not true. Cynthia, please. It's Christmas. Let's just have peace in this house." Peace. I lay there, my body throbbing, blood still staining my scalp, and wondered what kind of peace he meant. The peace of pretending, the peace of cowardice. The next morning, I came down to the dining room dressed in long sleeves and heavy makeup. Vivian served turkey like it was a holiday feast. "Merry Christmas, Cynthia." She sang, as if the night before hadn't happened. "I made your favorite roast turkey. My favorite was Mama's rosemary chicken." I sat quietly, chewed mechanically. The food tasted like ash. My father smiled at me across the table. "You're quiet today." Vivian touched his hand. "She's still mourning. Poor thing had another grief episode yesterday." He nodded as if that explained everything. I excused myself after 2 bites and went back upstairs, looked out the window into the snow-covered yard, and that was the moment I knew no one was coming to save me. There would be no miracle, no intervention, no justice wrapped in tinsel. I would die in that house, unless I found a way out. The days after Christmas blurred together. Vivian acted like nothing had happened. She hummed while cleaning the dishes, chatted on the phone with her society friends, and told Walter that I was in a fragile state and needed time alone. He didn't question her. He never did anymore. He didn't question the bruises, the cuts, or the way I avoided his eyes. I stayed mostly in my room. I barely ate. My ribs ached when I breathed, and a scab had formed at the edge of my hairline where the broomstick had split my skin. I had always thought pain was sharp and loud, like a knife. But I learned it could be quiet too, dull, heavy, constant. But something inside me had changed that night on the floor. Maybe it was the way Vivian looked down at me, smug and satisfied. Maybe it was the silence from the guests. Maybe it was the fact that my own father had chosen peace over protection. Whatever it was, I knew I couldn't stay. If I didn't leave soon, I would die there. Maybe not quickly, but slowly. A little more each day. Then, on New Year's Eve, my chance came. They were drinking. Of course they were. Walter had gone through half a bottle of whiskey, and Vivian was sipping something fancy with a slice of lime. I could hear their laughter echoing up the stairs. I hadn't heard him laugh in months. Not like that. Not with me. It was just after midnight when I crept out of my room. I needed water, real water. Not from the rusty bathroom faucet I had been sipping from like a prisoner. I padded quietly down the hall, every floorboard memorized, every creak anticipated. When I reached the kitchen, I stopped. Her purse was on the table, wide open. Something told me to look. Maybe it was desperation, maybe instinct. I stepped closer, heart pounding. Inside, I found a mess of things: lipstick, keys, a silver compact, and then papers. I pulled them out, one by one, IDs, all with her face, but not all with her name. One read Elaine Monroe, another Judith Grant, another Carolyn Ellis, different birthdays, different addresses, all fake. At the bottom of the pile, I found old newspaper clippings. Some were brittle at the edges, others folded crisply like she'd studied them. Headlines jumped out: "Wealthy New Hampshire man found dead. Widow vanishes. Suspicious fire claims. third husband in 5 years. Authorities investigate. Sudden death of businessman. No foul play suspected. My blood ran cold. I knew then. Knew that my mother hadn't just died. She had been murdered, just like the others. And Walter, my father, was next. I stuffed a few of the IDs and articles into the pocket of my nightgown and turned toward the stairs. "Where do you think you're going?" I froze. Vivian stood at the hallway entrance, arms crossed, half her face shadowed by moonlight from the window. I backed away, hiding my hand in my pocket. I was thirsty. Her eyes narrowed. "You've been snooping." "No, you're lying." She stepped forward, graceful and slow, like a cat cornering a mouse. "Give them to me." "I don't know what you mean." "You little thief." Then, suddenly, my father appeared behind her, bottle in hand, his eyes glassy. "What's going on?" "She was going through my purse," Vivian said without missing a beat. "She stole something." Walter looked at me. "Is that true?" I didn't answer. That was answer enough. He lunged before I could run, his hands wrapped around my neck. His grip was strong, too strong. My knees buckled as I clawed at his wrists. "Better end this once and for all," he growled. I couldn't breathe. My vision darkened. Then, "Not here." Vivian snapped. "The neighbors might hear." He released me. I dropped to the floor, coughing, gasping, retching. "Take her to her room," she said coldly. "We'll settle this in the morning." Settle. I knew what that meant. They were going to kill me. That night, just like Mama. They dragged me upstairs and locked me in again. But this time, I had something I hadn't had before. Proof, evidence, and a plan. The old wooden walls of my room had been damp for years, soft, weakened by time. I pressed my fingers into the baseboard near the window and began to dig. Splinters tore my nails. Blood smeared the edges, but I kept going. By dawn, I had loosened enough wood to reach the latch from the outside. I opened the door. The house was quiet. Vivian was sleeping on the couch. Walter was gone, probably passed out in the garage. I grabbed the documents I had hidden under my pillow, tiptoed to the front door, and opened it with shaking hands. Snow crunched under my bare feet as I stepped into the cold. "Where do you think you're going?" Vivian's voice again. But this time, I didn't freeze. I turned. "I'm not going back." I said, "Cynthia, no." I ran, down the steps, through the yard, past the mailbox, with our last name painted in fading letters. And I didn't stop until I reached Mrs. Eleanor Baker's house, 2 doors down. She was sweeping her porch, just like every morning. She saw me disheveled, barefoot, bruised, and dropped the broom. "Cynthia Lord, child, what happened to you?" I collapsed into her arms, and for the first time in over 2 years, I felt safe. Mrs. Eleanor Baker didn't ask questions right away. She didn't scold or gasp or tell me to calm down. She simply wrapped her coat around my shoulders, brought me inside, and locked the door behind us. She guided me to her couch and sat me down beside a warm fire she'd lit hours earlier. The scent of cinnamon tea hung in the air, soft and sweet. "My God, child," she whispered, brushing hair from my face. "You're shaking like a leaf." I tried to speak, but my throat burned. Everything hurt. My ribs, my back, my hands raw from clawing at the wood. My eyes welled up, but I swallowed the sob. "I have to tell you something," I finally said, and then I did. Everything. I told her about Vivian, about the beatings, about the photo, the faked identities, the newspaper clippings, the notebook, my mother's death, the years of silence. Mrs. Baker listened, lips pressed tight, eyes brimming with fury and sorrow. She held my hand the whole time. When I finished, I pulled the folded documents from my pocket, now wrinkled and blood-stained, and placed them in her lap. Her hands trembled as she opened them. "Lord in heaven," she murmured, "these names, these towns." She found the ID that read Judith Grant. I remember this name, this woman. She was in the paper back in '65. Husband found dead. She disappeared right after. I nodded. "That's her, Vivian Monroe. She's done it before. She's going to do it again. Mrs. Baker looked up, and for the first time, I saw something in her face I hadn't seen in years. Conviction. "You can't go back there," she said. "They'll come looking. They'll try. But you're not alone anymore." She let me stay in the guest bedroom that night. She bandaged my hand, fed me a hot meal, real food, and gave me a warm bath, the first in weeks. It felt like stepping back into humanity, like remembering I was someone worth saving. By morning, the rumors had already begun. Walter had been seen banging on doors, shouting my name. Vivian, in a wool coat and crocodile tears, was sobbing to anyone who'd listen about her unstable stepdaughter. The neighborhood, confused and uncomfortable, began to whisper. Why'd she run? She's always been strange. Poor Walter. First his wife, now this. Mrs. Baker didn't flinch. When someone came knocking, she stood tall and calm and said I wasn't there. And when the town's gossip mill began to spin out of control, she made a decision. I have a sister. She told me that afternoon. Helen Carpenter. She lives out in Phoenix, Arizona. She's got space, and no one would ever think to look there. My heart jumped. I don't have any money. I didn't ask if you had money. Honey, I said you had somewhere safe to go. I wanted to cry, but the tears were gone. In their place, a kind of steel was forming. That night, under cover of darkness, Mrs. Baker wrapped me in one of her husband's old coats and walked me to the Greyhound station 2 towns over. She bought my ticket in cash, gave me a bag with sandwiches, water, and clean clothes. Before I boarded, she grabbed my hand. I'm going back to the house, she said. I'll find more proof. If what you say is true, and I believe you, it's not just about you anymore. That woman's a killer. And I've known too many women who didn't get a second chance. Be careful, I whispered. She nodded. The bus ride was long, 16 hours. I barely slept. Every stop made my heart race. Every time someone glanced my way, I flinched. But I held on to that small paper bag in my lap like it was a lifeline. Inside was a photo of Mama and a folder of death. When I finally stepped off the bus in Phoenix, the air was warmer, thinner, and there, waiting at the curb, was a tall, silver-haired woman in a green scarf, holding a sign with my name in bold black letters, Helen Carpenter. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply opened her arms and said, "You're safe now." And for the first time since I was 19, I believed it might be true. Helen Carpenter was everything I needed in that moment, strong, composed, and not the least bit surprised when I collapsed into her arms at the Phoenix bus station. She didn't ask for details right away. She simply brought me to her modest home, a small stucco house with wind chimes on the porch and hummingbirds flitting around the feeder. She gave me her guest room, a soft bed, and the kind of silence that felt like comfort, not punishment. For a few days, I rested. My body was still healing, but it was my mind that needed mending most. I couldn't close my eyes without seeing Mama's face bruised, silent, or Vivian's eyes, sharp as razors, or my father's hands around my neck. But even through the fear, something stronger was rising in me. Resolve. It was Helen who handed me the newspaper article one chilly morning in March. It was from back in New Hampshire, a small piece in the corner of the society section, retired Hanover businessman and wife, mourn runaway daughter. Below the headline was a photo of my father and Vivian, side by side, faces drawn in mock grief. She's trying to spin it, Helen said, handing me a cup of coffee, claiming you're mentally unstable, that you ran away after years of problems. I clenched the mug so hard my fingers turned white. She's good at that, I said. She's been writing my story for 2 years. Then it's time to take the pen back. Helen had friends in law enforcement, retired detectives, advocates, women who had seen enough victims suffer in silence. She took the evidence I'd brought, the IDs, the clippings, the photo of my mother, and helped organize it. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. That's when Mrs. Baker called. She'd gone back to my father's house after I left and had found something hidden in the false bottom of Vivian's bedroom wardrobe, a shoebox, inside which was a notebook. Vivian's handwriting, meticulous, cold, inside, names, dates, amounts, methods, digitalis and coffee, read one line. Next to it, A. Jackson, eliminated as planned. My mother. Below that, W. Jackson, pending, $75,000. My father. There it was. The truth in ink. With that evidence, Helen's contacts moved quickly. A detective named April Collins from Tucson's Domestic Crimes Unit reviewed the materials and filed a formal case. Within 2 weeks, a search warrant was issued. Vivian's world began to crumble. The police raided the house. They found more forged IDs, poisons, and jewelry belonging to past victims. They found fake wills, and buried in her personal effects, a letter she'd never mailed, written in the same curled handwriting, "Once Walter is gone, I'll be free again." Vivian Monroe was arrested on 7 counts of murder. My father, stunned and broken, was taken in for questioning. At the trial, I faced them both. Vivian looked at me with pure venom, but her mask had cracked. She was thinner, paler, not the invincible ice queen I once feared. My father, he looked like a ghost, as if the full weight of what he'd allowed had finally sunk in. I took the stand and told the truth. I told them what she did to me, how he let it happen, how I nearly died, how Mama had died. I showed my scars, my bruises, my soul. The courtroom was silent. When the verdict came, the jury didn't even take 2 hours. Vivian was sentenced to life in prison, no possibility of parole. My father, though not convicted of murder, was sentenced to 5 years for neglect and abuse. He died in his 2nd year. Liver failure, remorse, maybe, or maybe just a man finally crumbling under the weight of what he chose to ignore. I didn't attend his funeral. Some said I should have, that he was still my father. But fathers protect their daughters. He didn't. I had no more room for that kind of memory. Not when I was busy building a life rooted in truth. It's been more than 50 years since I ran barefoot through the snow and collapsed in Miss Baker's arms, but I remember it like yesterday. I'm 76 years old now. I've got silver hair and a cane that creaks more than I do. I still live in New Hampshire, though not in Hanover. I could never go back there. Instead, I settled in a small town just outside Concord, where the air feels lighter and no one knows my name unless I tell them. I became something I never thought I could be whole. It didn't happen all at once. It took years. I went back to school in my 30s. With the money left from the house and what little I could gather working part-time jobs. I put myself through college. I didn't become a detective like Lieutenant Collins, but I studied criminal justice and advocacy. I began working with shelters, then legal aid clinics. Eventually, I helped launch one of the first women's resource centers in New Hampshire. I wasn't famous. My name never made headlines. But every woman who sat across from me trembling, ashamed, hiding bruises or emotional wounds, knew one thing the moment I looked them in the eye. I understood. And I still do. Today, I spend my time volunteering, baking too many pies, and sharing my story not for pity, but for power. Because if you're watching this, if you made it this far, you need to hear what I'm about to say. I was beaten, starved, silenced, betrayed by the man who was supposed to protect me, almost killed by a woman who wore pearls while planning murders. And I thought that would be the end of me. But it wasn't. Because the truth is, no one gets to decide the ending of your story, but you. Not your abuser, not your family, not your shame. You do. The day I chose to run, I didn't feel brave. I felt terrified. But bravery isn't about feeling strong. It's about acting even when you're broken, even when you think you've got nothing left. And here's what I want you to know. You are not broken. You are not crazy. You are not to blame. If someone is hurting you physically, emotionally, spiritually, that is not love. If someone is silencing your truth, that is not care. If someone says you deserve it, they are lying. You deserve freedom. You deserve safety. You deserve joy. And if you can't believe that yet, borrow my belief. Let it carry you until your own voice rises again. Because mine did. And every day since, I've tried to honor the girl I once was the one who whispered into the night. I'm still here. Mama, I'm still fighting. I fought. And now, I live. With 2 children who call me every Sunday. With 5 grandbabies who've never known fear. Who grow up in a world where women are taught to speak up. To say no. To run toward themselves instead of away. My mother never got justice in her lifetime, but she got it through me. And now I pass that torch to you. So here's my heart, handed to you across this screen. If my story stirred something inside you, please don't let it fade. Leave a comment, tell me where you're from, what you survived, or who you want to become. Subscribe to this channel, not for me, but because every subscription helps push this message further. Share this video with someone who might need it, a neighbor, a daughter, a friend who's gone quiet lately. You never know. Your share might save a life. And if you're the one in pain, the one still searching for a door, a window, even just a hole in the wall to escape through, know this, there is a way out. And when you find it, I'll be standing right here on the other side, waiting to welcome you home. With love, Cynthia Jackson, survivor, advocate, mother, grandmother, and the author of my own ending.